Sohim at the back.
Yes, I have a question for Abraham. I'm more going to ask you about a specific case related to between Pakistan and Afghanistan. We're talking about the refugee situation in different parts of the world, but I would like to concentrate in this area because of my personal interest. I mean, in between these two countries, a very unique situation. We have a situation of war. At the same time, you have, a refugee situation, enormous refugee situation with the IDPs that are now in Pakistan. Now, what is the role of UNHCR? Like, how are they going to balance between these two? Because you have refugees, Afghan refugees living in Pakistan, which now itself has approximately 3 million IDPs. So what is the UNHCR's, how would it manage between these two situations?
As far as refugees are concerned, of course we've had the Afghan refugee situation in Pakistan for a good 30 years. And the government of Pakistan has, right from the beginning, been very generous in hosting them and has allowed the international community to assist, to protect and assist these Afghan refugees over all these years. And most recently, we've also started we are seeing the repatriation of Afghans, and it's still ongoing as we speak. So clearly, it shows that we are dealing with a particular group of refugees that are clearly identified, but originally the cause for the flight, the reasons for them being in Pakistan for so many years is all known to us. So a very clearly defined group. Today we are talking about something that, if my figures are right, 2.4 million people within Pakistan, nationals of Pakistan, who've been displaced as a result of the internal conflict. Now, there are specific camps and locations that have been identified to look after them. But our experience is evolving, and we've realized that many of these people are finding their own solutions. They're kind of, going to families, going to friends, etc. And UNHCR is very pleased with this sort of possibility where they are able to find alternatives rather than being in the camps. Being in the camps is not a happy thing. No one wants to be in a camp, neither do we want refugees to be in camps. But camps are part of a policy of many states to be able to identify the refugees. So in this case, we don't know to what extent families and friends will be able to continue providing this hospitality. And we just hope that it will not crack under the pressure. So they are being dealt with separately. UNHCR is on a daily basis, it's rushing in humanitarian supplies together with the World Food Program and all its other partners. And we are trying to help them meet their basic needs while a solution comes by for everything to return back to peace and normal living.
Yes, question now.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone, for the very informative speech you gave us. The question I have is pertaining to some issues that is of current politics and importance to Australia.
Sorry, could you repeat that louder?
The question I'm coming up with is something of interest to the current politics in Australia, which is much more of a term coined as queue jumpers, that is asylum seekers who are coming to the shores of Australia on boats and being brought in by people smugglers, as they call them. There are many protracted refugees living in camps, and those are waiting for settlement as time goes by. But many countries who are resettling these refugees are being overwhelmed by asylum seekers who are coming to their shores and are being resettled. Now, some quotas given by countries, visas, that is, visa quotas, given such as 13,750 by Australia every year, seems to be blotted or taken away, particularly by asylum seekers who are coming. Now, are there new strategic plans put forward by UNHCR periodically to address these kind of issues to ensure that there is a more resettlement protracted rather than to new emerging refugees. Of course, all of them deserve to be looked at the same time, but for those who are protracted and living in refugee camps seem to be below the stack and not being resettled more quicker and earlier. That's the point. But the actual question is UNHCR looking at strategic plans or thoughts or ideas periodically to help such countries resettling refugees to ensure that protracted refugees are given much more priorities and quicker priorities.
Thank you for the question. When we talk about basically, you're touching on a very, very important part of where we'll be finished with all this refugee situation one day. UNHCR always thinks about closing its office, and it has never been able to do so. Over the years, even when I joined UNHCR, we were talking about a couple of million refugees, and today we are talking about a total of 33 million refugees and other persons of concern to the office. When you talk about resettlement, we must remember one thing, that resettlement is not necessarily in the interest of refugees themselves. Because if you were to carry out some survey or something, you will see that a vast majority of them are actually talking about being able to go home, back to their homes. And often this has taken a long time, but our experience has shown that eventually many of them have been able to go back home. And we talk about Afghanistan. Angola, after 30 years, people went back. And we have so many situations where refugees eventually have been able to go back. It is not very straightforward for many of these large numbers of refugees who are living in countries of asylum to be able to stay there, particularly because the states, the host states, do not necessarily always have the capacity to host them forever. They were received, they were given all the protection, but after some time, some of the states do not have the capacity to deal with very, very large numbers. So this is why UNHCR is now working together with all the other United Nations development agencies and other financial institutions to try and see whether it's an issue of resources that could perhaps help states to absorb some of these people and be able to find solutions for them in the host countries. But regarding resettlement, we must remember one thing, that resettlement is also linked to the capacity of states to resettle. UNHCR has been, of late, been talking about the capacity of UNHCR itself to be able to give hundreds and thousands of referrals to the states. And we do this by prioritizing in any refugee situation or in any refugee group. We prioritize as to who may be the most vulnerable refugee who is in need of resettlement as a tool of protection. In other words, resettlement is not automatic. Just because you're a refugee in a country, for us the most important thing is that you've been able to find asylum.